so much to talk about. Dr. Clark said, so little time. There's so much to talk about and so little time to discuss it. Give thanks for Dr. John Henry Clark and such a legion of ancestors. He just comes in my mind a lot when having these conversations, because he has such a soulful, loving, which includes that often necessary tough love. But you're hearing from somebody who loves you, Dr. Clark. But yeah. So I'm not going to spend all day inviting y'all. Y'all know what time it is. So please spread the love and let people know we're live at the Shamba, Cultivating Ground. And I'm getting ready to so you'll hear us from time to time make mention of WRFG radio, and I might make mention of Thursday. We're not hallucinating. It's actually pre-recorded. So that's why we're talking about Thursday, okay? It ain't got nothing to do with anything in the atmosphere or any medicinal substances going wrong or none of that. We're just talking about what is happening on the radio on Thursday. And I want to make sure we have everything proper. I think we do. Okay, there we go. All right. Peace and blessings, everyone.
Peace.
Thank you for joining us. We're going to start this recording. You're tuned to WRFG Atlanta, 89.3 on the FM dial, WRFG.org. This is the Ancestral Rock. And wow. It's been a serious cycle of seasons. And I'm thinking about the fact that we're in the month of November, I think the last day of November, if I'm not mistaken. And we're getting ready to be in the winter solstice again, which as a farmer, and just not just only exclusively because I'm a farmer, but just as a human being living in this world and being conscious of the cycles, it's a very important time, and so this is a time of reflection, because in a minute we'll be planting our seeds again, our plans for the year, and now we're reflecting on how those previous year's plans went, right? So many different cycles and circles that we experience in life, but there's no cycle that we can all say, let me put it another way. There's one cycle that we can all say we go through at least once. And the ancients tell us we go through it many times, which is the cycle of going through our mama's womb. The birthing cycle, the birthing process, if you want to use that word, And that's something that is, again, it's something that is unique and also, what's the word I want to use? Something that we can all relate to, basically. Something that is that we can all process or we can all reflect on, because we've all gone through it in some way or another. It's just almost like eating food. I always hear about breatharians, but I've never met one. So the food conversation is something we can all relate to, because we all eat food, right? So we have today with us a master teacher. She's really, truly, people throw this word around, but she's a living legend. You know what I mean? Like real talk. And she has been right there at the gateway for so many people in our community, generations now, in our community. And we're going to get the chance to really get some of that, talk about her history, her story, as it relates to being a mother, a part of the welcoming committee that welcomes the returned ancestors. And it's just an honor to have her with us, to sit at her feet, talking about Mama Sarahn Henderson of Birth in the Tradition. Mama, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us.
Thank you. I always enjoy being on your show and sharing with the community what it is that I have to share.
True.
You know?
True.
Does make sense for me to have all the information, not be able to share it with people. So thank you. I'm humbled.
Give thanks. Give thanks. Well, I want to start at the beginning. Don't want to assume that those people listening know who you are and even know what we're talking about in terms of the birth tradition. I describe you in the caption as a midwife. That's correct?
That's right.
Right? And I know that is something that is a name that is often feared or kind of people are afraid to use that name sometimes, that word, but also it's a name in some circles that's thrown around all over the place, you know. So please explain to us what exactly that is. What is it? What does it mean to be a midwife?
Yeah, so, a midwife, the earliest documentation of a midwife, goes back into the biblical days. And if you read, you'll find that midwives were even threatened back then. And
so it's nothing new.
It's not anything new. It's part of our history. And midwife means with woman. And that's what we do. And I think that once once birthing became medicalized, and people in the past used to associate medical professions as being men and whatnot, it kind of started changing, and then it became medicalized. There was an effort to make it medicalized, and I think even today.
When you say medicalized, please explain what you mean.
What I mean by medicalized is out of the natural law of nature. One time I was at a birth, and the grandmother was there. The grandmother had hospital births, herself, and her daughter had actually had 2 hospital births, and then this third birth was just a really divine birth. It was a home birth, and her mother was there. The grandmother was there. And she says something to me that I'll always remember. As I was walking out the door, she gave me a hug and she says, "Thank you for showing me how God intended birth to be." And so that's what I mean. How we know it in terms of the medical side is, with medicine being a part of the birthing process, being managed by doctors and nurses, as opposed to allowing your body to birth and let go on its own. And so it's being assisted by medicines, by surgery, and just taking it from the realm of being natural and normal. Now, birth can sometimes become medical, and I'm not knocking hospitals or doctors, because there is a place for them, But when you compare women, and you compare women who are considered high risk and women who are considered low risk, there's far many more women who are low risk. And so for those people that need to be in the hospital, they should have their babies in the hospital. But those who want to embrace birth and go through the process and trust the process of our body loosening so that it can open up, and allowing the body itself to expel the baby. You can give birth to your baby without having somebody standing over you, counting to 10 as you push. There's a natural reflex that's in our bodies that lets those babies go. You see it oftentimes when you paying attention to news or either on YouTube, and you see the daddy driving, speeding down the highway trying to get to the hospital, and the woman's like,
"We ain't gonna make it."
Like, the baby's coming. He's like, "Hold on, just hold on. I can't." And the next thing you know, the baby's in her panties because the baby came out. So just letting go. It's like letting nature, just how we watch these trees, go through its process of budding in the spring and then flowering in the summer and giving fruit, the summer and the fall, and then using the fall and the winter to go back into the ground. So it's very similar to that. And so, anyways.
So Mama Sarahn, I would say you make it sound so simple in the context of the now moment when a lot of the world is even more on pins and needles and feeling nervousness, feeling adversity, feeling fear about their medical future or their health future, and there's like this thing about, well, we need we need the medical world more than ever. I mean, I know that's not about birthing, but I'm saying to say, I'm wondering, when did it change have you seen it shift in your lifetime when, as you're saying, birthing became more medicalized? And because what I'm talking about, just to be clear, that you're making it sound simple, is it's just as natural as the breeze blowing and the wind, and it is, I'm sure. I'm not a mother. I'm the father of 4 daughters, and I studied as much as I could, because even their mother was studying to be a midwife. You know what I mean? You know her.
Yeah.
But I can't say I've been through that. But I'm saying, do you understand my question? When did the anxiety that is now in society, do you remember a time when that anxiety became more prevalent? I know you're saying in the biblical days midwives were still feared and fought, but I'm just assuming, maybe I'm wrong, that in your younger days when you started this process and even when you were learning from people, it was a different type of trust in the natural way.
Yeah, it's interesting because I really honestly think that it began in my grandmother's generation, that shift. There's a lot of oral historians that are in my family, in the women lineage, and I learned from hearing from my mother, who heard from her mother. And when I first started midwifery, it was really important to me to learn about our history, the history of the Black midwife, and our culture, and our traditions, the birthing culture and pregnancy traditions. And I couldn't find it when I first came into midwifery. I came into midwifery in 1980. And so I made it my business to dig and find out more of our history to see how we got to where we are today. In addition to hearing the birthing stories of my mother and my grandmother. And so in that, a lot was revealed. It first came to me, our history made itself visible to me when I went to a library downtown and saw the video documentary, All My Babies. And All My Babies was filmed here in Albany, Georgia, down south Albany, Georgia, in 1952. And it featured a granny midwife named Miss Mary Cooley. And you followed her through the pregnancy and birth of 2 families, one who were farmers that lived in the rural areas, and the other family lived in the town. And you see how the transition from the granny midwives began to evolve to the elimination of the midwives. So there was always, from the 20s on, there was a plan to eliminate the midwives and to shut down home births and to do like a herd thing, funneling all women, whether they were Black or poor white, everybody into the hospital. And so that's on the side there. In my research, I also spent lots of days and hours at Georgia's archives, where we can really dig up a lot of our history. If you want to know anything about Georgia's history, you go to the archives. And through my days of spending time there, I was able to retrieve names and addresses and numbers of granny midwives that I thought would still be living. And then I contacted them And then for a few years, and then up to maybe about 5 years ago, I would go to the rural parts of Georgia to interview them and to get their stories, because now they're telling me their stories, and their stories, their living legendary stories took place like during the civil rights, segregation, Jim Crow eras. So I was able to get a connection from that era to the era where we are right now. And a lot of them were forced to retire. And once they call themselves shutting down midwifery, then it had a ripple effect. It had a ripple effect. Not only were people now feeling like, oh, I can have my baby in the hospital. A lot of times we compare ourselves with other women and consider what they have might be better than what we have. And so I think a lot of our foremothers fell into that, thinking that having your baby in the hospital was better.
Was a move, a step up.
Yeah, it was a step up. Yeah.
Like leaving the land and getting a condo in the city and all of that.
All of that. Same story, yes. And so, but what happened as a result to that is that we began to lose our motherhood. That language, that narrative, that teaching that was being taught from mother to daughter, from daughter to daughter, about how to care for yourself during your pregnancy, what to eat, what not to eat, what taboos there were, and the women in the church and your neighbors, even if they were miles away, and the women that you would come in contact with at the general store, this is back then, they were your doulas. They were the ones that taught you the things that you needed to know. That was that motherly wit that was being passed down. And so when my generation, my grandmother, when my grandmother was birthing babies, she came in that transition where, for instance, my mother was born at home in Savannah, but then my uncle, who's 2 years younger, was born at Grady Hospital on the colored side. And this was becoming a norm across all the South. And these mothers were also being experimented on. If you ever come across the video documentary that Ricky Lake put up, The Business of Being Born, you'll see some of what it is I'm talking about. So in the 40s and the 50s, they started introducing the Twilight drug. So that Twilight drug, I'm a product of Twilight. My mother gave birth to me and my brother, who was a year older than I, under Twilight. She said you were high. She said she felt like she was floating in the air. She knew she was in labor. She didn't feel anything. She was not cognizant of what was going on. The next thing she knew, when she woke up, I was being introduced to my mother by a nurse. So then along came the spinal block, and then eventually the epidural. And so what happens is that we have generations. We have 3 generations. We have my generation, the generation of my children, of our children, and now their children, of women who adopted this as being the norm because that's all they know. The mothers cannot tell the story of what to eat and what not to eat. But one thing, we are so distracted from what's being offered to us. I can get on this road right here in front of us, and there'll be a McDonald's and a Dairy Queen and a McDonald's and a Zaxby's and
a liquor store.
All of those things that distract us when we think about you might hear me sometimes promote, if you want to birth like your ancestor, then you got to be like your ancestor. Because yes, I make it sound like it's easy, but it's not easy. It's a lot of work. It takes work to have a healthy pregnancy and to give birth to a healthy baby and to have a healthy postpartum and a healthy breastfeeding experience. It takes work. And so I think that shift took place. I know that shift took place because now we have generations of mamas who can't lean on their mothers, for support and guidance because they weren't given that support and
So
guidance.
they don't even think it's safe, so they don't have the confidence.
They don't.
The mothers don't even, they wouldn't do that. In their mind, they wouldn't even do that to their children to lead them into something that is unsafe. And all
Exactly. So you have you have grandmothers who are encouraging their daughters, go to the hospital, and get that epidural so you won't feel it. You don't have to suffer like the way that they used to, But then I have my population of mamas who do want to have their babies normally and naturally, and they want to feel what it feels like. And it's not easy for everybody. Some women do have it easy, and some women, do have some difficulty. But they always come out empowered by their experiences. I tell people that, I think that, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, that hospitals, have its place. And really, to me, what's most important is making sure that these babies get through the portal safely. And really, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter where you have your baby. I have two of my grandchildren that were born in the hospitals. They were born via C-section. And I told that mother, I told my daughter-in-law, it doesn't matter. Don't feel intimidated because your man's mother is a home birth midwife. It doesn't matter to me as long as my grandchildren get here safely. My other two grandchildren, on the other hand, they were born, at home. But see, my children, they grew up with a mama midwife. And so they don't have that kind of fear. And when I came into my childbearing years, so I'm going to fast forward a little bit, really the only people that were really interested in having a natural birth, whether it was in the hospital or whether it was at home, were your people who were striving to live a healthier, a more natural lifestyle. They wanted that to be a part of their lifestyle. When my husband and I chose to have all 5 of our children at home, is because we had embraced a natural lifestyle. We did that together when we first married. We changed our diets, we changed our way of thinking about food, and we just felt like having our baby at home was going to be a part of our lifestyle. And so it took work. It wasn't like I felt like I could eat anything and do whatever and sit back and watch TV and not get any exercise or anything. It took work. It took
but you were conscientious, though. You were conscious of it.
I was conscious about
You made a very clear decision, a conscious decision.
And in that, I made sure that my lifestyle reflected that. Not only the way that I ate, but I would wake up every morning. My husband would wake me up every morning, and we would do yoga. Are we still on?
Yeah, we're still on. Go ahead.
We would do yoga every morning, and I've always been a part of the African dance community too, and so I kept myself active through dancing, and those were the type of people like me that were really attracted to, I would say specifically, home birth. Okay, they were what
it was like a subculture, so to speak.
It was, and they could be pretty much identified, stereotyped. You can't stereotype everybody, but they were definitely your vegan, raw, vegetarian, Birkenstock, dreadlock, hippie kind of folks.
Not the Birkenstock,
right?
Rice cake eating.
Yes, sea moss smoothie drinking. People crack me up with this sea moss now. They make it seem like sea moss is the newest thing on the planet, but it's been here forever,
For a long time.
We've been using it forever, yeah. And so what I see today are people who want to birth. They want to birth without it being managed by other people. They want to birth without being threatened. They want to birth without interventions. They want to birth with at least their man, their partner. But today, especially today, these last 2 years since we've been dealing with COVID, all of a sudden home birthing has become normal and safe. And it's good. But people are coming home to home birth out of fear.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is it for the right reason? Is it for I don't want to say wrong or right. Is it for a progressive reason?
Yeah, no, it's escape.
Mm.
It's escape. And a lot of times, what I'm finding over these last 2 years, it can kind of be a little bit frustrating sometimes. But what I'm finding is that they're escaping, they're running away from hospital, but they're not embracing the totality of preparing
the
yourself.
fullness,
Yes. And so I don't consider myself a nutritionalist, but I know enough about nutrition where I can guide mothers. And I have spent more time teaching about nutrition than I ever had before. And that's just to keep women from bouncing out of their home birth dream and bouncing to the hospital because they're still carrying on with their regular dietary habits, sitting in front of the screen, either working or whatever, not getting that fresh air and that sunshine and that exercise and the good foods. They're door dashing their meals in, and it gets to be hard. But I say I'm gonna meet these people where they are. You know, everybody is not embracing, you know, a healthy lifestyle in its fullness, but I'm gonna meet them where they are and work with them the best that I can. I think I'm speaking not only for myself, but for all midwives, whether they're working in the hospitals, in the birthing centers, or at home. We're being bombarded. And but I think about the granny midwives. You know, I think about the granny midwives, and I think about my mother's generation on back who ate red meat, they ate pork, bacon, all that kind of stuff. And so I say, okay, if they can work with people who had ordinary diets, then I'm going to see how I can adjust. I might have to do more education and whatnot.
But it was also possibly a different lifestyle. Even though the diet was part of the lifestyle, they were more in a natural environment, and especially stress. I keep wanting to just ask you about this stress. You know, because even as you were saying, you know, a lot of the mothers are coming to this now through fear, which they just say spiritual thought, new thought, and then there's really nothing new about it at all. But, you know, it says that if you attract what you fear, just like you attract what you say you want, you know. So if you're coming at it in a less than constructive way, then there may be something that's detrimental to you. So I mean, do you see that to be accurate in terms of the difference in lifestyle, generally speaking, with those elders who used to eat, they used to skin their own hog, for instance?
Hey, I bring it on down home. I bring it all the way down. I'm like, if you want to birth like your great-grandmother or your great-grandmother, then this is what that lifestyle is like. Yeah, they ate the pig that they raised. Yes, they ate the beef that they had in the backyard. But those cows and those pigs and those chickens were fed right off the land, scraps that was being thrown out there. They were not raised in stalls where they were injected with hormones and antibiotics and things like that. The vegetables they ate. I mean, if you got married, once you got married, you dig that backyard and you start planting your food. Because we did not have Publix and Kroger's and Whole Foods, and not to mention the Zaxby's and the Kentucky Fried Chickens and all that.
That wasn't even an option.
It wasn't an option. If you wanted to eat, you grew your food. And we had a barter system that was going on back then too. So your neighbor who was at the next farm, they might have raised chickens. So you can swap, you know, organic fresh chicken, eggs or chicken, you know, with the vegetables, you know, that you grew. Our mothers back then, they were stronger women. Back then they didn't have cars, and if they did have a car, all they went to was church in that car. But most people did not have cars. And so when she had to go to the store to buy her flour or her rice or whatever, she walked. Even if it was an all-day trip to the general store to get her goods, she walked. They walked to church. They walked to their neighbors. When she washed clothes, she washed it by hand, and wrung them by hand, and hung them up by hand. And so our great-grandmothers, they were stronger as well. And they had the encouragement of the women in their community, whether it was their neighbors or the women in the store, like I mentioned, or the women in the church. They had the encouragement, that mother wit that was passed on to them to give them that mental strength. So they wouldn't have those fears that women are carrying today. So that's where I'm trying to get these mothers to, is to ground themselves, to see themselves in their great-grandmothers and their ancestors' image, and live like that.
So what would you say to the argument that, well, some of that, them not having to walk, our mothers not having to walk anymore, not having to wash with, hands and everything, is progress. And then if it's progress, my question is then also, are you saying that the lack of these types of activities as a part of a natural part of our daily life has created a new type of woman who is not ready to then face the natural way of even giving birth? Is that a fair summary of what you're saying?
Mm-hmm. And
so then we got to go back to walking instead of driving, and washing our own clothes to be able to be ready to.
And we're in a modern world. We're in the 21st century now. And so even if it means you go to your neighborhood high school's track and walk around the track.
So you can adapt it, but you got to be more mindful about adapting it.
That's right.
Because when you have these conveniences, they say convenience killed the cat. And I started understanding that earlier in life, that saying, So you have these earlier conveniences now, so that actually may dull in your blade a little bit. It may make you less sharp to deal with, like even for instance, for my generation, I remember when we moved to California with my mother in the mid-'80s, and that was, we still had metal shop, wood shop, and
in school.
There was another one. There was a metal shop, wood shop, and there was another trade that was in school, like auto mechanics. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, more and more, and there's people even in the Black community, prominent people who carried this narrative that was being disrespected. I would say that was looked down upon more and more in my lifetime. As something that we're better than that. We can achieve college education and all this kind of stuff. We can reach for the stars. We don't need to do this manual. And to this day, here we are in 2021, and the people who build those skills are the ones they building the houses for the people who went, to college and are in all kind of debt to pay the mortgage. Speaking very generally. So it is a kind of twisted situation with this whole thing of this notion of progress.
Yes. And so, there's been some progress. There's been one good progress that has occurred is the birth of the doula. Okay?
Could you explain what that is?
Yes. So a doula, when I was having my children, we called people who would support you in labor your labor coach. And then the name doula got attached to it. But the original doula is the grandmother, is the mother, If you think back in the days when women were having their babies at home, you had the midwife there and the grandmama was there, her mother, or her auntie, or some other, woman who experienced childbirth to help in the birthing process. And so in our progress of going to school and going to college and leaving home, getting jobs in other places away from home, we don't have the support of our mothers to guide us through that birthing process. I woke up to that with my third child. With my first child, my mother was here because he was born in the summer. My mother was a school teacher, so she was out during the summer. The other 4 children were born during the school year, and she was teaching, and she lived 10,000 miles away from me. So the second baby, I made it through because we had a really nice, tight community here in Atlanta, where we created extended family with each other, With the third child, I was like, I need help. And so my midwife sister friend, Mama Sarahn, she and I we designed what we thought would be helpful for women, a postpartum aftercare in-home service. And I thought about everything that I needed as a mother, and then everything that I needed to keep the household wheels rolling. And we put those two together. And back then, there was no computers. We didn't have computers in our houses at that time. And so I went to a typesetter who did the graphic design and whatnot, created a brochure. And then I went to doctor's office, midwife's office, people that taught childbirth classes, yoga classes, anywhere that pregnant women went. Then I would deliver these brochures to, and we created what's considered now as the Postpartum Doula. And that's a woman who comes in to your home and helps you to adjust, make those adjustments into motherhood, breastfeeding your baby and understanding your baby's cry, and understanding the need to rest and to heal and to eat healthy foods, in addition to doing the light housekeeping chores for her and whatnot. And then I think we were a little ahead of ourselves, because at that time there was no word or a profession, doula, not even a labor doula. So a labor doula is somebody that comes in and helps you through the birthing process, rubbing your back, giving you massages, giving you water to keep yourself hydrated, being your cheerleader, and in the hospital setting, being your advocate. Because that doula knows the lingo of the medical professionals that are in there. They know about the different medicines that women sometimes, rely on for pain management. But they know how to help you walk without needing that pain management. Because a lot of times when people are hiring a doula, they're either hiring the doula to avoid a C-section, even if they choose pain management, or they're choosing a doula because they don't want to have pain management like drugs. Okay. But they want the support of another woman. And so that's what a doula is. A doula is a support person that comes in to help a mother and the father. She's not there to take the role away from the father. She's actually supporting both of them. She's showing him how to support his lady, effectively during the birthing process. Listening to the nurses coming in, offering their cocktail of pain management, and, letting the parents know, I'm here, I got you, And so that's what a doula is. But I am, as much as we need doulas in our world, I'm making an effort to re-empowering the grandmothers. Because a lot of times the young ladies are not asking their mothers because the mothers are not giving them the support that they want. But it's not to their fault. It's because they didn't have the support.
They weren't taught it.
They weren't taught. They didn't experience it. So if you teach the grandmothers how to support your daughter, the importance of keeping her hydrated, the importance of keeping her encouraged. Everybody doesn't have an 8-hour labor, a 12-hour labor. Sometimes it does go on. My labors, I always had long labors, but I always had support, to keep me going. And so my daughter and I don't know if you kept up, but my daughter and I, we take expecting mothers and their families and their support people on hikes.
Yeah, I've seen on social media a little bit about that.
We do that, and we do that deliberately so that we can get women out of the house, so they can get that walk on, get that exercise, get that fresh air, get all of that oxygen that the bushes and the trees are giving out, And and our water breaks are, everything is intentional about our walks, and so our water breaks are intentional too. The water breaks, what I do is I expose them to different Black birth workers that are here in Atlanta, and I invite one person at a time to be our guest hiking presenter. And then during our water break, which usually runs about half an hour, then they're teaching about whatever it is that they're teaching, whether they're doulas, whether they're midwives, whether they're herbalists, whether they focus on mental health, you know, prenatal, pregnancy mental health, maternal mental health, and then they talk. And so what this does, it exposes them to people that they might not normally have met. And so anyways, I was saying that because I was trying to think of one of the guest hikers that we had. But anyways, what were we talking about?
What I wanted to ask you, we're talking to Mama Sarahn Henderson, y'all. Those of y'all who joining us live on social media. Mama Sarahn, today, for those of you joining us on WRG, we're making reference to something that's already passed, but I think the information will still be pertinent at that time. Today is Georgia Give Day, right?
Yes.
And I know that you were a part of a few very powerful and necessary organizations. So please give that information before we make any further moves in our conversation. Give the information about how, what the organizations are and how folks out there can support.
Okay, so I am a woman of different hats, and so and they all embrace one another. They're all part of me. And I'm not just a midwife, I'm not just a mom, but I'm also a founder and a member of Giwayan Mata. Giwayan Mata is a all-female African dance, vocal, and percussion ensemble here in Atlanta, and we provide culture.
Life,
yes, through our organization,
life to the place.
We do through our storytelling, through our songs, through our dance, and through the sounds, through the drums. And I'm also a member of the Community Midwives National Alliance, and so I want to speak of those two in particular. This is Giving Tuesday, and both of these organizations are nonprofit organizations. And this is a day where, if you want to give, this is a good day to give. With the midwives. Oh, and I also want to mention too that I'm also a sister of Sister Song, which is a reproductive justice organization that's based here in Atlanta. All three of those organizations, Sister Song, Community Midwives National Alliance, Giwayan Mata, are open platforms to donate. There are a lot of women that would love to have their babies at home that are qualified, good, healthy folks, to have their babies at home that might not have the deep pockets that would help to fund, their home births and whatnot. And Sister Song has a birth justice care platform within their organization where people like you can make donations to the organization. And what they do in turn is when people are seeking either a midwife or a doula or a lactation specialist, a breastfeeding specialist, then they can apply for grant money that will help them to cover the cost of what they're looking for. Okay, that's Sister Song.
The Sister Song is Giwayan Mata and the
Community Midwives National Alliance, and so that's an organization that some of us midwives created here in Atlanta to create alternative pathways into midwifery, other than one particular one that dominates and monopolizes, that oftentimes disincludes women of color, brown or black, from being able to pursue midwifery. Midwifery back in the days, I'm going to try to summarize all this. Midwifery back in the days here in Georgia, back in the 1920, there were over 9,000 midwives, black midwives, all over Georgia. Wow. And that makes sense because we had to walk to these persons. So I wouldn't walk to a Birkenstone mountain like I can do today by driving. So you served your community. Okay. When they tried to emancipate midwifery, then in the 60s and 70s, white women started realizing that what we were doing had value to it, you know? Right. And so it kind of took over. More white families are having their babies at home than ever, and there are more white midwives that are out here than there are black midwives. There's probably about 10 times more. And so what we're trying to do here is to create a new pathway where women who want an alternative pathway to becoming a legitimized, either certified or licensed midwives, we're trying to create that pathway for them. Some people might shun away from licensure, but there's nothing wrong with licensure. They might try to regulate. I hope not. And if they do regulate, I hope it's something that we feel like we can still work within. But even the granny midwives, they were trained and they were certified by their county health department, you know. And if they weren't certified, then even back then, they could get into some trouble.
But it is what it is. I mean, when it comes to the ultimate goal, or the ultimate destination, bringing forth healthy babies. I mean, that's just a question we ask ourselves all the time. What if growing your own food became regulated, which it is in some states? You gonna bow to Nebuchadnezzar? You gonna grow your own food? How far do we go? Because we're already seeing this now, in terms of like the vaccinations for COVID-19 and all these kind of things, And there's a lot of controversy with that, but I'm just saying from the perspective, wherever one stands on their personal choice, the perspective of governmental control and regulation of our lives and our choices is a serious thing. Somebody is asking in the comments for the name of the organization again, please.
So I'll name the three of them again. So it's Community Midwives National Alliance, and we do have a website, so .org. And then there's sistersong.org. Community Midwives National Alliance is the organization that we have formed. We have also joined hands with another organization here another national organization, but they have a chapter here in Atlanta. The National Certified Professional Midwives. We join hands together so that we can present a common bill. Since 1993, we've been going to the Capitol trying to license midwives, and they've always pushed us to the side. They didn't think we were serious or important. There was other things that were more important. And that's happened time after time after time. So we've united ourselves, and we're preparing ourselves for this coming legislative season, which will begin in January. And we do have a bill, the Community Midwives National Alliance. We have a Senate Bill 111 that you can read as Publix online.
Georgia Senate. Senate Bill 111, y'all.
Senate Bill 111. And so our efforts right now is to raise funds so that we can promote our efforts in trying to reinstate midwifery. Reinstating midwifery into the maternal health care system is a necessity. And if it means licensing, then so be it. But we have to repopulate ourselves. Georgia has, neck to neck to Louisiana, we have the highest maternal mortality rates.
Wow.
Back in 1980,
and the lowest education is just
all of that.
It's rough.
When I started doing the research on Georgia's history in terms of midwifery and birthing, and our maternal and our infant mortality rates. I recognized then that Georgia ranked in the top 5 of infant mortality, and we were like somewhere in the teens of maternal mortality. Okay, so their efforts in trying to eliminate the midwife and to have everybody have their babies at home was to change the maternal and infant mortality rates. And here we are now. I've been doing this for 41 years. So here we are 41 years later, and we're at the top. So somewhere along the line, the system has failed us, has failed our mothers. We have more mothers that are dying in this state, and the rate of Black mothers compared to white mothers, Hispanic mothers, Asian mothers is disproportionately higher,
of course,
than any other nationality. So it's like, why are our mothers dying?
It's almost like when I hear you, I'm getting chills when you say that, and also when I heard you in your introduction as you were laying the landscape in terms of what we're coming from. How did this, where we personally are right now, how did this develop in terms of the society's acceptance and comfortability with midwives and everything? I wonder if the system failed us, or if, as Du Bois says, this system cannot fail those it was not designed to protect in the first place, you know?
Well, it's definitely a product of systemic racism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we see it, we feel it, the mothers, they experience it. We've never been high on their totem pole anyways. And so a lot of our mothers get dismissed.
Right.
I was watching Will Smith's movie the other day, and I was thinking about Serena, you know, and if Serena was not cognizant of her own body and her own medical health, and if she did not know how to advocate for herself, she may not be here today.
True.
You know?
And so many.
And there's so many other women that are
she's
like
one
her.
that has notoriety and access to material wealth and all this.
And a lot of people don't.
Right,
and a lot of people they don't have the voice. We have to empower ourselves to use our voice. We have to remember that we're hiring these doctors. Just
say that again, like they're working for us.
Yeah, it's as easy as you hired them.
Just like the politicians. I know today is voting day in Georgia too. You know, for re-election. I mean, they supposed to work for us.
Exactly.
And that's such another point that sounds so simple, and it is that simple, but goes overlooked because of our miseducation.
That's it.
We're talking to Mama Sarahn Henderson, y'all. There's some questions in the chat, and I wanted to switch gears just a little bit, Mama Sarahn. We're going to take some questions first, but I think one of the questions actually kind of speaks to one of mine. Our brother Mel Chris, what's up, Mel Chris? Was saying, was there a time while someone was giving birth at home that you felt concerned that the situation, I think it says, was beyond your skill set? And I wanted to ask a similar question, but more from just a general, not necessarily a hazardous time or a challenging time, but maybe, you say you've been doing this 41 years. You've helped to birth a lot of babies.
2 generations.
Wow. Just if you want to address that question, but also speak to us about maybe one of the most memorable birthing experiences that you participated in, outside of your own, birthing your 5 children.
Okay. First, I want to show that there is a distinct difference between a doula and a midwife and an OBGYN. Okay? A doula, I've already explained what a doula is. A midwife is somebody who is trained and educated to walk with a woman who has no problems going on. Somebody who we don't foresee any problems. She's had a healthy prenatal history, and but we're also trained and experienced in knowing when pregnancy or labor is veering off. We stay in our lanes, okay? When the mama is veering off, like taking the exit off of the highway and running into some problems, then we know that we need to then refer her to somebody that drives in that lane. And that's your OBGYN. Okay, they're the one that can catch the problems and a lot of times resolve the problems. And so, yes, there does come time where labor has gone outside of my scope of practice. There's times when prenatal care, pregnancy, has also gone beyond my scope of practice, especially if the mother's developing problems. Let's say, for instance, when I look at some of those things that do fall under that maternal mortality, there are some things that we can do on our own to keep ourselves off of that list and to change our narratives and our statistics. A lot of that has to do with our lifestyle, including our diet. Gestational diabetes is one, hypertension is another, preeclampsia is another, and anemia is another. And so sometimes if these mothers are persistent with their high sugar levels or their high blood pressure readings, or if their blood pressure has now turned into preeclampsia, then she's outside of my scope. And so then I do have to, refer out. Most midwives, like myself, encourage women to have a backup doctor because there's no guarantees.
Anything can happen.
Anything can happen during pregnancy and during birth. Anything can happen. You can plan for the best birth. You can have that birth plan written out really well. You can have the best diet on the planet. And then you come to find out during labor that your baby's head is in an awkward position that's not allowing the baby's head to come down into the birth canal and birth this baby. And then you have mamas that either labor for days and days and then they eventually get clinically exhausted. Or you can have a baby that says, I'm tired of this.
I'm tired of this pushing.
And no, they start pooping.
Uh-oh.
They say, I'm tired of this shit. Let's get on with this. Sorry the language. But anyways, that's what meconium is. Meconium is poop. And sometimes when the baby is distressed during labor, then they will poop. And so, yes, to the person who asked that question, there are times where labor does change. And it's not just in the home birth. You can have a mother that planned to have a natural birth in the hospital with the intentions of delivering her baby vaginally, naturally, and still something might come up, and the mother still might have to have a C-section, I tell people, don't get so grounded on where this baby is born, how this baby is born, okay? The most important thing is to bring life forward.
Right. But I thank you for the question, brother, and also thank you for your response. Because if I may, I would say that the most important thing is not, as you just said again, where, because this is about life in general, and this is why I asked you to speak today from your personal experiences as a midwife, and also as a mama. Where I want to switch gears into is like this whole question of the birthing experience in life. I know that you've been around the block and seen a few moons, a few winters, right? So you can speak about that like you would speak to your children outside of the birthing process, where it would seem like, as they say, the journey is the reward. So even being grounding ourselves in the process of being more comfortable with our natural selves, even if we got to end up doing something else, is the biggest part of this whole thing. I
want to give an example of a mother that did transfer out of having a home birth. That was her experience filled my heart up. She didn't end up going to the hospital and having a C-section, be mad about her experience, She woke up one morning and I was looking forward to her birth as well. There's some mamas that I really look forward to being with, and she was one of them. I look forward to all of them. She was one that I really, really wanted to see go through that process and do that process with her. And she woke up in the middle of the night and felt wetness. So she was excited and said, oh, my water bag broke. She got up and went to the bathroom, and on the floor was all this meconium. And she hadn't even started labor yet. And she showed me the picture, did the camera thing. I was like, honey, I said, this is not good, especially with labor not having even begun yet. Okay, the contractions, the surges, right? I said, we need to go on and shift gears. And the night before, we had this conversation, and she was just dead set on having this baby at home, and da 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 da. And when women get locked in that real tight, it concerns me how they're going to respond if it doesn't work out that way, because it's not no guarantee, you know. And so that evening when we were talking, and she was telling me about how much she was looking forward to having this baby at home and this, that, and the other, I asked her, I said, well, what if the baby's not born at home? And she stopped and paused. She was like, well, she says, I know that I don't have control over. I know God is in control of these babies and whatnot. She says, I said, even if you did transport to the hospital, don't let that experience take away your joy. When that baby comes out and you hold that baby for the very first time and you look into that baby's eyes, I guarantee you, your heart is going to be full. You're going to forget about all the plans where we are, how he got here. You're going to fall in love. There's going to be so much endorphins that are going to be pouring out between you and your baby. Don't let that steal your joy. Your baby will be here. Sure. You know? And so, anyways, it did turn out that her baby wanted to be born in the hospital after all. But they kept me in their birthing process all through labor, and even when they had to make the choice of having a C-section, they did have a C-section. As soon as that baby was out, they sent me a picture and told me that they had the best experience with their midwifery through their prenatals, and that talk that I had with her that night was what helped ground her. Yes.
I see. We're here with Mama Sarahn Henderson, grandmama midwife. You have great-grandchildren yet?
No, my oldest grandchild is 13.
Okay. I said, don't rush me now. That's why I be asking people that.
It took me a while, Roscoe, to even accept the term. People start calling me grand midwife and started asking me I went to my first naming ceremony, and they needed an elder in the room to give permission to get started. Everybody looked at me and I've arrived.
Yeah. With stripes, all right? It is what it is, with stripes. So that's me, that's Ross Kofi as a representative of our community giving you that title. You know what I mean? That's nothing you call upon yourself, because that's another thing right now. You know, people create titles for themselves and all this kind of stuff. Now, this was earned, tried, and true. So we give thanks for your presence. So I was saying, this is WRFG Atlanta. Again, for those of y'all joining us on social media, we're pre-recording a conversation with Mama Sarahn Henderson of Birth and the Traditions. Someone was asking how they can get in touch with you, so I'd like for you to answer that before we move on, because I would like to switch gears now in terms of the metaphorical birth. Like, you know, in the caption, in the introduction, we were talking about the fact that everybody I know is going through some type of, it's like going through the squeeze, and as many people as I know that would call it stress or this, that, and the third will refer to it as, like, I feel like I'm going through the birth canal again. So you've already shared so many jewels with us. Now I want to ask you as a grandmama, as an elder in our community now, you know, to share with us some of those principles that are part of the birthing process that we can apply to our everyday life as we are moving through universal and environmental shifts that definitely are affecting our personal, you know, reality. You know what I mean? And that's a very general statement, I know. I mean, a question, I know. For instance, I have a curriculum called Life is a Farm, where we attempt to do the same thing with agricultural world, you know? Like, you know, the premise is that the fundamental principles of agriculture are very similar to the fundamental principles of human life. You know, like your mama always tell you reap what you sow. You know what I mean? And just start with that one, you know what I mean? But first, please tell us where, we'll ask again, but how can people get in touch with you? Some
So
sisters are asking in the
you
comments.
can get in touch with me in 3 different vessels. Again, these are the Giving Tuesday vessels of how you can reach me. First, you can reach me personally. I am on social media. I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram. You can find me on Instagram under Sarahn, Sarahn Henderson, or either Birth in the Tradition. And you can also, if you like a little flavor and spice and some drumming and singing, you can find me through Giwayamata, giwayamata.org. We're on we're on Facebook and we're on Instagram as well. And then Community Midwives National Alliance, you can find us on Facebook. We're developing our Instagram page, but you can definitely find us or find me on that particular Facebook page, Community Midwives National Alliance.
Sure. A question came to my mind before you go. We go into the metaphorical, esoteric birthing process. I was speaking with the brother Baba Ifa Benga, the other day, and just talking about the rise in African spirituality in the pop culture, in the popular culture, and he attributed it to a few things, including people of world renown like Beyonce, who are declaring, their affinity with Ifa and all of this kind of stuff. I didn't even know that was, as the young people say, I was yesterday old when I found out that Sade was a priestess. I never knew that. I make perfect sense. Yeah, Obatala, priestess. Makes perfect sense though, you know what I mean? But in the same vein, I just thought of, I was thinking of some pictures I saw of you recently at Erykah Badu's concert. And as you were talking about how from the time of your grandmother's generation, when systematically the palette was changed and it reached down to us, systematically, through fear and everything else, these people started making us step back from what was very natural to us. And then how white folks and other people, that maybe had more access to funds and started understanding nature and understanding what we were doing all along, started making it more popular again.
And then sell it back to us.
And then sell it back to us, like they did with our cocoa, and they sell it back as chocolate, as Kwame Nkrumah said. I mean, this is the story of our life, right? You know what I mean? I ain't want to go there, but it's real talk. So there's that. I mean, because it's the same thing with agriculture. It's literally, I'm feeling like we're in a parallel universe, when we're talking about our particular skills and our realms of influence. However, then there also are people who now, from our culture, from our perspective, are, again, being a voice for this natural way. Do you think, like people like Badu, for instance, being so openly vocal about being a doula and all of this kind of stuff, how do you think this has influenced us? Because I'm asking you to juxtapose that with the fact that, for instance, COVID has driven people to home births out of fear. On the farm, I can say the same thing. This business here, matter of fact, we're in the Shamba Marketplace, which is the birth and my business is on the farm. So the Shamba is called a cultivating ground. It's a Kiswahili word. It's for a shameless plug, which means cultivating ground, but there's a connotation that is more than just a farm where vegetables grow. It's where family is, So these two businesses have come together. But I was going to say that we had our soft grand opening. I think you may have been there. March 2020. 3 days later, a global pandemic was declared. Then we see this rush when people talking about, what's the word they were using? There was some word that was out there in terms of people being able to stay at home and chill and everything. There was none of that for us, It was just like people rush, like, how can I get some food? But a lot of it was out of desperation, but a lot of it was also, I would like to think that because we've been doing a lot of work in this community for years in terms of just helping people to see that we don't need to be ashamed of the land, even though we experience a lot of trauma on the land. Shout out to Sister Leah Pennington. She wrote a powerful book called Farming While Black.
I got that.
And you know, when she was talking about how, you know, the land was the scene of the crime, but was not the criminal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but anyway, I'm just asking, you know, so we had a rush of people who were excited and kind of woke up and started to say, okay, well, I can rely on my mama for sure, Mama Earth, you know. I can't rely on all them names you mentioned. So I'm just curious, how has that influenced, do you think, how has that influenced our community? People like Erykah Badu, people that, you know, have some type of notoriety, speaking in a positive way about natural birth.
She's a sweet lady too. Sweet, sweet, sweet woman. She has her her performance presence that's fun to watch also. I've been privileged to attend a couple of births with her here in Atlanta. And I think that what she does and other people of that limelight, what they do is they use themselves as an example. And there are a lot of people that look up to these people.
Indeed.
You know, Erykah has a lot of followers. Summer Walker, I was able to attend her birth. She has a lot of followers. And the thing that I like about Erykah is that Erykah's presence reinstills that calm and that peace and that trust. And that's what she gives to women. When I listen to other women who have had Erykah as a doula, that's what she brought. That's what she brings. And that's what needs to be cultivated, not just with people like Erykah, but with everybody, you know, with everybody. They have big voices. They have big audiences. And people like to do what they do. You know, if they see themselves. When they see people like them doing something like this, then they see themselves in that person. You know, if she can do it, I can do it also. You know, how do I go about being able to link up with the right resources and the people, you know, to be able, you know, to do that.
Yeah, that sounds, I've always felt that one of the divine uses of celebrity is just that, you know? And that's why, you know, the example, you know, to be an exemplar is such a huge part of that. And it can sometimes feel like a heavy burden on people's shoulders. We just want to live a regular life, you know? However, that's just how our human nature is set up. So that's just part of it, you know? You know, it's part of it. We learn the best practices and things to leave alone sometimes from it, you know. So yeah, that was interesting. So Mama, we don't have too much more time with you, and I'm grateful for you taking time out to be with us. Let's just talk about this birthing process. Where would you start in that conversation in terms of relating the birthing process that a mother has to go through from conception, really, to this process that we all seem to be going through in one way or another in the earth?
Well, I'm not a farmer like you. Okay, you have a, you know, big space, but I do garden. Okay, I learned gardening through my grandfather. My last year in college, last 2 years in college, my cousin who went to Spelman, I went to Clark, we decided to move in with our grandparents. One of the things that I took up in moving in with my grandfather was following him to the backyard. Every time he came home from work, he'd put on his white overalls and his boots and his hat, and I put on mine too. And I didn't know anything about gardening, but he says, anything you want to grow, I'll help you. And so he helped me from preconception. Okay. And what he would do in the fall, he would till his ground up, and he would place rye seeds and whatnot so that it could put the nutrients back into the soil. he would send his soil off to UGA to get it tested to see if there was any lack of anything that was in it so that he could put it back into the earth.
Absolutely.
And then come springtime, then he began to plant. And so I thought about things I wanted to plant. I wanted to plant popcorn. I wanted to plant garlic. I wanted to plant some other kind of vegetables. And he gave me all the space and the encouragement. And I went out there every day with him. There was a gardening store called Hastings. Do you remember Hastings?
No.
That was prior to Home Depot
Right,
and
obvious.
some other places, okay?
Right.
That's where he'd get all his tools and his seeds and his fertilizers and whatnot from.
This is Atlanta.
Yeah, right in Southwest Atlanta. And so then we would plant. When it came to weeding season, we would weed. When it came to harvest season, we would harvest. My grandmother did the canning. He planted enough to give to the neighbors for the birds and plenty enough to feed the family through the growing season and to can so that it can go through the winter season too. The only reason they would go to the store was to get bread, flour, things like that, and meats, right? So, to answer your question, let's begin before you start to plant that seed. Consider your womb as the garden of your baby's soul. Okay? And you want to, as a good farmer, you want to plant that seed in good, rich soil.
Absolutely.
That soil is going to require that you eat a well-balanced meals, making sure that you're getting your proteins, your calcium, your iron, your omegas, all those things that help to fertilize your womb soil, okay? So that when you and your mate decide to come together and you plant your seed, then that seed is being nestled into a womb that is welcoming it. Okay, and safe. You can have a farmer who puts fertilizer and compost into his ground and nurtures that ground all year long, and you can have another farmer who said, it's okay, we'll go another year, and does not nurture his soil or her soil with compost and fertilizer. At the end of the day, this farmer over here is going to yield a healthier crop than this one. This one might yield some, but this farmer right here
is going to be a toss-up.
Yes. And so you have to look at yourself, look at your womb as being the garden. Your mate is the farmer. You all are working together to make sure that this garden right here is nice and healthy. The seed is planted. Now you're going to continue to nurture that seed as if you are a farmer, okay? And continue to give that growing seed in your womb the fertilizer and the compost that it needs. Whether it's kale greens, sea moss, your other, important foods, that's what it takes, okay? Just as that growing seed needs the wind to help it grow, and it needs the sun to help it grow, you do too. It's important to move. You got to move your body. Give it the exercise, whether you're swimming, whether you're doing yoga, whether you're doing Tai Chi, whether you're dancing. You got to move that body. That movement helps that baby define where it needs to position its head properly when it gets ready to come. Your body needs that sunlight. That sunlight is giving you that vitamin D. You need the vitamin D for bone structure and other things as well. You need that vitamin D to keep your immune system up. There's no sense in harboring fear of having your baby in the hospital. So I have my baby at home and still have a certain level of fear and not getting outside to get that sunlight that's going to boost your immune system up. The whole idea is not to rest in fear, but boost your immune system up. What knocks me down sometimes is when women show up to me and say, oh, well, the doctors always told me I'm anemic. I've always been anemic.
So I've been knowing this for a while and I haven't done anything. I haven't felt empowered.
Why not? Why not? The reason why not is because you learn how to function daily with mental fog, low energy, and fatigue. But that's not normal. If you build that chi up through through your sea mosses and your herbs, your nettle teas, and your red raspberry tea, and eating your green leafy vegetables, you will see that fog is going to disappear, and your energy, that light, that vitality will rise back up. And that's what we need. And that has to be cultivated has to be nurtured all throughout pregnancy. And it's not just a physical thing, it's mental, it's spiritual. Everybody is not blessed to conceive a child.
True.
There are some people who are barren, Give thanks to the Creator that the Creator blessed you to even have that seed to accept being in your body and nurture it. It's like your God and goddesses, so why not take your pregnancy to that level and nurture it to that level so that you can give birth to other little gods and goddesses as well, and I always tell people at birth, I said, there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee how this baby's going to get here. The baby's book of life has already been written. From the time that the baby is born to the time that person leaves, that book is already written. We do not have access to that book, but we can help to facilitate it in the best way that we can, okay?
Like they say, the pen is lifted and the ink is dry.
Yes.
So it is what it is.
It is what it is.
But exactly. It still doesn't give us a sense of resignation. It shouldn't give us a sense of resignation, like we don't have any part to play in the in-between process. I think that's sometimes what happens, like, it's already written, so then I'm just going, that often that attitude can easily take root.
And it does. And it does sometimes. So I tell people when they go into labor, when labor begins, then take a moment and pray. Give thanks. Give thanks to the Creator that your pregnancy has brought you this point, and ask the Creator to open the door so that this baby can come through safely, and reap, reap what you sow. And so I always go to the garden.
Yeah, I feel you. As you're speaking, as we wrap up, I'm thinking of a few things that, again, I have to always say with great respect to the mamas. I ain't experienced firsthand, but I've seen, and some of them are metaphors that we even find in the scriptures, like birthing pains, like a woman in travail, you know what I mean? And thinking about the fact that at the end of that, sometimes people relate that to the cycle even in a washing machine. You go through all this turbulence, but what is at the end of it? Clean clothes, clean garments. So the birthing pain now, just assuming that this is, what I want to ask you is, how can you tell the difference between a birthing pain, or I don't know if in the birthing experience there's some type of false labor, or some type of false, not just false labor, but a pain that is not due with labor, but something that is based on trauma, How can you really distinguish that, What are some of the signs that you can really distinguish between birthing pains, like what naturally comes as the baby is ready to come into the world, and something else that needs our attention? And I'm asking that for full disclosure, because if we're going through trying times in life, and we know that this is part of the process, it kind of hit different than if we I don't know what's hitting me. You understand? I don't know what's hitting me. I don't know where, which side is up. I'm just in the valley right now, and it's just rough. You know what I mean? And I know so many people who feel that way, even in this moment, with all that's going on in the world.
Yeah. So, there's, I can take marriage for an example. A lot of people, they're dating, they see this side of you and whatnot, and then there's that love and infatuation, yeah. And then you all get married, and now you're in each other's space. And you go through similar cycles of it being easy. It seems like it's easy, and then something presents itself, and that something might appear to be difficult and maybe even painful, you know, in some situations. Roscoe, I've been to plenty of ceremonies where you have let off on libations and 7 bowls. When I think about the condiments that are in those 8 bowls, those 8 bowls, these are condiments that reflect different experiences in life that we're bound to go through. And some of them are wet and slippery as water, refreshing, you know. And some of them are sweet as honey. And some of them are bitter as the cola nut, you know. And hot like the cayenne pepper, yeah. And so as we go through challenges in our lives, whether they're marriage challenges, because we all go through them, or whether it's pregnancy and birthing challenges, those 8 bowls are to show you that yes, you're going to experience them, but you can also overcome them. Don't get caught up and wrapped up and tie yourself in a knot. There is going to be another side of it. You have to go through the process. Sometimes the process is short, sometimes the process is long. Sometimes labor is easy, and sometimes labor is hard. Sometimes labor is short, sometimes labor is long. Sometimes marriages are short, sometimes marriages are long. Sometimes the journeys that we want to take in life are short, some of them are easy, some of them are long, some of them are difficult. But at the end, what did you learn about yourself?
That's the key. Yeah, real talk. Real talk. That's the wisdom of the mama, the grandmama midwife, Mama Sarahn Henderson. Thank you so much for joining us today. I just so much more. I was talking about Dr. Clark at the beginning. You know, he often say, "Let us bring to an end that which has no ending."
We can go on and on. This is my passion. This is my love. This is my life. You know.
The time shake and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? We got the seal, but you've given us a lot to consider. You know, and the thing, you know, even as a word to ourselves and to everyone out there listening, the whole thing of the birthing process, and you know, a lot of times. I remember one time even I was going through a very painful personal experience, and an elder said to me, this was years ago, I was teaching at Frederick Douglass High School, and she was like, you know, y'all young people, y'all just don't know how to stick it through. And fast forward to now, there's a wave, there's a chain of thought, a train of thought that said, well, you never go through anything uncomfortable. This kind, if it's uncomfortable, it's a sign that that ain't for you. And that really, to me, don't mesh with nature. And so I was asking even in that perspective, you know, because there's a difference. If you know this is uncomfortable and this is part of a process versus this is something that is dangerous and traumatic, that is unnecessary for my, you know, that I need to leave it alone, because we have this thing where you mentioned marriage, families are just splitting apart, businesses, people themselves, you know, suicide is at an all-time rate in our community, because there's a sense of I don't need to go through this. There's nothing at the other end of the tunnel, you know, and that's a real meditation.
It is.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on today. It's not all the time that I'm speaking, you know, with an audience as vast as the radio and whatnot. And I do want people to know and to realize that that birth is a joy.
That's it.
You know, I thought at one point I was a junkie, a birth junkie. After that 5th baby, I was like, okay, snap out of it. Because it did hurt, you know, labor did hurt.
Right.
And like you're saying, it's like sometimes the best things in life is not easy. You know, it does take a walk, a hike, being squoze, you know, to the point where you don't think that feel like you went through the ringer, but you do come through on the other side, and you realize that's one of the things I do realize as I'm an elder now. I used to worry a lot. I used to worry, fuss, and complain a lot in my 20s and 30s. Let's say with my husband. And I realized that once I got into my 40s and my 50s, that the things I worried about and stressed about in my 20s and 30s, they worked themselves out. And a lot of times for the best. So it taught me not to worry and stress the same way that I used to. And for you all that are out there, don't fear birth. You know, it may not feel good in the moment, but I tell you, when you push that baby out, ain't nothing but happy tears gonna come out.
Shit. I bear witness. Bear witness. I've been able to catch all of my babies, except for the last one. That girl came so quick. So the first baby was born in the hospital. But it was pretty much, that was just the physical setting, because we completely took control, you know, from all the nurses on the floor were coming by our place just to take a break, just to get, you know, to take a deep breath. We had aromatherapy, we had it all going on, you know what I'm saying? But the rest of them were born at home. But the youngest baby, Ina, she's in a sophomore year of college now. She came so I didn't catch her. And that one was when her mama did a different type of birth where she was actually squatting. But it's just been, I'm just saying all that to say the process is beautiful. It's very humbling. It's just a very humbling experience. It's something I will never forget. Like one of them almost broke my back. when I was supporting her mama, you know what I mean? And she did some kind of push, and I was like, talking about whiplash like no other, you know, but we're talking about beautiful experience. As a Baba, it's just an honor.
The other day,
so I'm just grateful for people like you who have nurtured that resurgence of appreciation in that. Such a beautiful experience. Like I couldn't imagine having not experienced that, you know?
I was gonna say I clicked on Facebook the other day. I haven't spent as much time on Facebook as I do Instagram, because most of y'all like to do Instagram. And a memory came up. Busara. I had to pour libation for her. You know, she was your midwife.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, Mama Busara.
She was one of the midwives of the earlier days.
Yes. And you mentioned Mama Nasra earlier too. Another one person, I met her not even in the context of a midwife, but during the first time Sarahn and I we expected triplets, and we lost them, you know. Then twins after that. So I remember she was at the time married to this priest. I think that was one of my first connections with the world of Ifa, right there on Edgewood Avenue.
Chief.
Yeah, the chief. Yeah. I was just, but the circle remain unbroken.
You know? Always.
Yeah, for our generation, for our progeny.
Yes.
Thank you, Mama.
I appreciate what you do too.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we here.
Yeah. Y'all come check out this garden back here, this barn back here.
Yeah, we having
got
fun.
Some good looking greens out there growing.
Yeah, we having fun. And life is truly a farm. Like just listening, and I want to shout out Mama Eshe too, Eshe Faiza, the herb lady. One of the first people to really put in my head the whole concept of living with the seasons. You know, living with the seasons. She always teach that. You know, this is my 27th year on the radio, and she was there from the early times as a featured guest. You know. I'm saying that even as I'm thinking about the autumnal work, you know. As we coming in, we were talking about reflecting on how the season went and then getting ready to make that plan and getting everything solid so that the winter solstice, we're ready to roll, you know, in the darkest, you know, time. And then as the spring comes back out, you know, so we're standing on great shoulders, you know, we're standing on many shoulders, you know, as they say, if ever we seem tall, it's because we stand on
shoulders. That's right.
That's it. Mama Sarahn, y'all. So again, one more time for information about how to contact you.
Okay, so you can contact me on Instagram. Okay, Birth in the Tradition. You can also contact me on Facebook, Sarahn Henderson, or Birth in the Tradition. And the other organizations I mentioned that you all can give your giving hearts to today and any other day for that matter, is not just on Giving Tuesday, is Gwayen Mata, GIWAYEN, Mata, MATA.org. You go to the donate button there and you can make a donation, or you can go to Community Midwives National Alliance Facebook page. If you go to my link on Instagram and go to bios is going to take you to the link for the midwifery legislative funding sources. And so you can make your donations there today. This evening we're going to try to do an Instagram live tonight and talk about midwifery and legislation and getting ourselves licensed.
That's on Birth and Tradition.
That will be, yep.
Okay, wonderful. What time is it?
And that will be, we're saying about 8 o'clock or 8:30. We're still confirming it, but it's going to be somewhere right around the time. So just tune in at that time.
All right. For those of y'all listening on WRFG, of course, that was something that happened 2 days ago.
That's right.
But, you're just in a little time lapse. Peace and blessings, y'all. Please take care of yourself and take care of one another. We're gonna road. Give thanks.
How was that?
Powerful. Beautiful.